3 smugglers, 3 separate schemes, all converging on one ordinary day at a UK airport. By the day's end, all 3 would be in handcuffs, their secrets exposed. It was a typical Tuesday morning at Birmingham Airport on November 11, 2024. Flights landed, passengers collected their luggage, and the terminal buzzed with the usual hustle of travel. Everything seemed ordinary, just another day at one of Britain's busiest airports. But hidden in that routine scene were 3 very different criminal plots about to collide with justice. A mother who turned her children into drug smugglers, a dealer whose carelessness would expose more than he intended, and a man confident he could stroll through customs with a suitcase full of illegal drugs. These 3 stories, seemingly unconnected, would soon converge in spectacular fashion, revealing the dark undercurrents flowing through Britain's airports. Airports have long been prime targets for drug traffickers who bank on the sheer volume of travelers to cloak their illicit activities. But as these stories show, even amid the chaos of busy terminals, vigilant eyes are watching for the slightest hint of wrongdoing. Farzana Kauser was a 54-year-old mother and grandmother from Bradford who led a double life. Neighbors and friends saw her as just another mom, perhaps watching her take her kids to school or chat over tea, with no inkling that behind closed doors, she was brokering massive cocaine shipments and plotting sophisticated smuggling runs. In public, she was just the ordinary mum next door. In private, she was the mastermind behind a multi-million-pound international cocaine trafficking ring. Investigators later called her the linchpin of a highly sophisticated network moving cocaine from Mexico into the UK. She wasn't working alone. Farzana coordinated with contacts overseas, including a mysterious figure known as Uncle in Pakistan. This suggests Farzana had tapped into a wider international network, perhaps family ties or cartel contacts abroad, giving her access to huge quantities of cocaine at the source. Together, they arranged drug shipments that looked from the outside like harmless family vacations, but were actually carefully planned smuggling missions. It's not often that police encounter a drug kingpin who is a middle-aged mother of several children. The contrast between Farzana's homely appearance and the ruthless criminal empire she ran was striking. Unusually, she made her drug operation a family affair. Instead of keeping her loved ones away from crime, she pulled them into it, some barely adults at the time. Her son Hamza was only 17, still legally a minor, when he was sent on smuggling runs, forever altering his future. Her eldest, Junaid Shafak, 33, became her right-hand man, organizing travel and logistics for the group. Mohammed Amir Shafak, 28, acted as a courier, literally rolling cocaine-packed suitcases through airport terminals. Another son, Umar Mohammed, 22, also served as a courier when he should have been starting his own adult life. Farzana even drew her 19-year-old daughter, Safanor, and a daughter-in-law, Sarah Hussein, 27, ensuring almost no family member was spared from her illicit scheme. Virtually the entire immediate family was entangled in the conspiracy. Beyond the household, a trusted family friend, Khaled Abdul Kawi, 36, joined in as well, showing how far loyalty and greed spread in their circle. One can only speculate how Farzana convinced her children and relatives to go along with such a perilous plan. Did they join out of love and loyalty, fear, or the lure of wealth? Perhaps some believed they were helping the family secure a better life. Whatever her methods, Farzana's hold on those around her was strong enough that nearly everyone close to her became entangled in her venture. At the top of this tight-knit operation was Farzana herself, issuing orders and expecting absolute obedience. For her children, loyalty to their mother came at the cost of their own freedom and futures. For Farzana, using her family was the ultimate cover. It allowed her to hide a merciless drug empire behind the facade of ordinary domestic life. The method the Kauser family used to smuggle drugs was both daring and deceptively simple. They would book short flights to places like Dublin or Amsterdam, travel with little or no luggage, and timed their return to Birmingham to coincide with the arrival of a flight from Cancun, Mexico. Why Cancun? Because a corrupt insider at the airport would slip suitcases filled with cocaine onto the plane bound for the UK. Once in Birmingham, Farzana's crew, fresh off their short-haul flight, mingled with passengers from Cancun at the baggage claim. They would simply pick up the unclaimed cocaine-laden suitcases from the Cancun flight's carousel and walk out as if those bags were their own. To any bystander, it looked like a family retrieving their luggage after a holiday. No false-bottomed cases, no clandestine handoffs in transit. The drugs were hiding in plain sight inside standard travel bags. The brilliance of the scheme was in blending into the normal flow of airport traffic. The conspirators didn't need fancy concealment. They relied entirely on timing and misdirection. The true risk was at the moment of interception, but if done smoothly, no one would be the wiser. The family pulled this trick off multiple times between August and November 2024, perfecting the routine with each run. It's believed that prior to their capture, the family had already smuggled significant quantities of cocaine using this method, meaning large amounts of the drug likely made it onto UK streets before the law caught up with them. Everything hinged on timing and composure. There was very little room for error. A delayed flight, an unexpected customs check, or a missing bag could unravel the whole scheme in an instant. The family tried to mitigate those risks by carefully coordinating every step and even rotating which members went on each trip, so the pattern wouldn't be too obvious. The couriers had to appear completely normal, calm, casual, and unhurried to avoid drawing the slightest suspicion. Imagine one of Farzana's sons, back from a weekend in Amsterdam, casually strolling over to a carousel unloading bags from Mexico and picking up a suitcase. To an untrained eye, nothing about the act would raise alarm. Airports are busy places, and it's easy for such a move to go unnoticed. As long as they acted like they belonged, who would suspect that the family chatting and smiling as they rolled their suitcases toward the exit were actually hauling millions of pounds worth of cocaine? For a while, the plan worked flawlessly, but by early November 2024, the National Crime Agency, NCA, had started noticing that something was off. They picked up on an unusual pattern. The same group of people taking quick trips to Europe and returning just as flights from Mexico were landing. It was too much of a coincidence. Quietly, the NCA began an investigation and set up surveillance to see what the group was up to. On November 11, 2024, the day of the family's final run, undercover officers were positioned around Birmingham Airport, watching and waiting. That morning, as a Cancun flight arrived, agents observed members of Farzana's crew blending into the crowd at the baggage carousel. CCTV later confirmed their actions. The suspects calmly lifted 6 heavy suitcases off the belts serving the Cancun flight, each one planted with cocaine by their contact in Mexico. At first, everything seemed to be going as smoothly as all their prior runs. Confident as ever, the group then wheeled the luggage through the customs area and out toward the parking lot, looking for all the world like travelers who had just returned from vacation. But this time, law enforcement was one step ahead. The moment the smugglers started loading the drug-packed bags into waiting cars outside, officers sprang their trap. In a flash, the operation was busted. NCA agents and police officers swarmed the group from all sides, catching them completely off guard. Up until that moment, the smugglers thought they had gotten away with it yet again. The next, they were face to face with officers and realized their perfect plan had just spectacularly fallen apart. One can only imagine the shock and panic that hit the family in that instant. The game was suddenly up. Passers-by in the arrivals area watched in surprise as this seemingly ordinary family was surrounded by law enforcement. Within moments, 6 suspects were handcuffed and placed under arrest on the spot. The family, who thought they had perfected the art of sneaking contraband through the airport, now found themselves standing on the pavement in front of their own seized suitcases. All 6 of the intercepted suitcases were opened on the scene, and what was inside stunned even veteran investigators. A staggering 180 kilograms of cocaine compressed into blocks and tightly wrapped for distribution. It was one of the largest drug hauls in memory at Birmingham Airport. Experts estimated the shipment's wholesale value at around £5 million, and if broken down into street deals, it could have fetched up to £14 million. By any measure, this was a colossal cachet of illegal drugs. By seizing it, authorities not only cut off a rich profit stream for the traffickers, but also potentially prevented hundreds of thousands of individual cocaine deals from flooding into communities. Taking 180 kilos of cocaine off the streets was a major victory, one that likely spared many people from the misery that accompanies those drugs. The bust wasn't just a lucky break on a single-day smuggling attempt. It effectively took out an entire supply line. The Kauser family's repeatable pipeline of cocaine from Mexico to Britain was severed in one decisive stroke. Photographs later released by prosecutors showed pile upon pile of the seized cocaine bricks. a vivid illustration of just how much product the family had been moving under the guise of family holidays. In that instant, their elaborate scheme came crashing down, and the ordinary life they had used as camouflage was stripped away to reveal a massive criminal enterprise. Amazingly, the Kauser family's saga was just one chapter in the fight against drug trafficking at Birmingham Airport. Another case, which started with far less fanfare, demonstrated that even a tiny mistake can unravel a major criminal operation. Back in February 2016, airport security staff conducting routine checks happened upon a very different kind of smuggler. Among the passengers preparing to board a flight to Pakistan was a man named Majid Hussein. He presented himself like any other traveler, and nothing seemed amiss at first. But when officers inspected his carry-on bag at the departure gate, they discovered a small wrap of heroin tucked inside. It was such a simple and obvious find that it took everyone by surprise. To the officers, it seemed almost too careless to be true. They wondered how a drug dealer could make such a basic error. Had Hussein grown overconfident after flying under the radar before? Or was this simply an outrageous lapse in judgment? Whatever the cause, that oversight proved to be the beginning of his undoing. Hussein hadn't even bothered with an elaborate hiding method. The heroin was just there in his bag, as if he forgot it was illegal. Airport staff immediately detained Hussein and alerted the police. What started as a minor-looking incident quickly escalated into something much larger. Investigators were intrigued and suspicious. Was Hussein just a foolish individual with a personal stash, or was he part of something bigger? Either way, that little packet of heroin was the loose thread that, once pulled, would begin to unravel Hussein's entire hidden world. Within hours, authorities secured a warrant to search Hussein's home on Nansen Road in the Saltley area of Birmingham. They suspected that the heroin at the airport was just the tip of the iceberg, and they were right. What they found at his residence blew the case wide open. Even seasoned officers were taken aback by the haul. In Hussein's bedroom, hidden under his bed, they found a suitcase containing approximately 1 kilogram of heroin and 4 kilograms of cocaine, an illicit stash with an estimated street value of around £250,000. It was as if they had stumbled into a drug dealer's personal warehouse tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. But the discoveries didn't stop with the drugs. The search also turned up a small arsenal of weapons. There was a semi-automatic handgun complete with 27 rounds of live ammunition. That's not something a casual user keeps around. It's the kind of firearm a serious criminal has on standby, ready to enforce their will or fend off rivals. Next, the officers found a stun gun disguised as a mobile phone, a clever, covert device designed to incapacitate someone with an electric shock while looking like an everyday object. And as if that weren't enough, an air pistol turned up among Hussein's possessions as well. This collection of weaponry underscored just how dangerous he was. He wasn't just dealing drugs, he was prepared to use violence to protect his operation. Perhaps the most striking find was the money. Officers recovered about £300,000 in cash squirreled away in various hiding spots around the house. Seeing that kind of money piled up in a residential home drives home the point. Hussein had been making a fortune off the drug trade. The quiet neighborhood around him had no idea of the arsenal and contraband hidden behind his doors, until officers showed up and carried those illicit items out. One can imagine his neighbors' shock as they watched police haul away bags of evidence from a house they had assumed was perfectly ordinary. Those bundles of notes were the profits from countless drug deals, money earned by flooding the streets with harmful substances. While Hussein stacked up cash, the drugs he sold were fueling addiction and violence in his own community. Taken together, the drugs, the guns, and the piles of cash painted a chilling picture of Majid Hussein's double life. To his neighbors, he might have seemed like an unremarkable guy, but in reality, he was a prominent figure in Birmingham's drug trade, one who was armed and thriving financially from his illicit business. This little find at the airport had led to a big fish after all. When Hussein's case reached Birmingham Crown Court in August 2016, the scale of his criminality was laid out in full. Facing the inevitable, Hussein pleaded guilty on the opening day of his trial to all charges, sparing the court a lengthy proceeding he couldn't hope to win. The charges included possession of a prohibited firearm, possession of a disguised firearm, possession of ammunition, possession of Class A drugs with intent to supply, and possession of criminal property. During sentencing, Judge Patrick Thomas QC delivered a sharp assessment. He described the mixture of guns and Class A drugs as a toxic combination, highlighting how dangerous such a pairing is for the wider public. A drug dealer with a firearm can terrorize a community in multiple ways, and the judge made it clear that this would not be tolerated. Hussein was sentenced to 12 years in prison, a substantial term that reflected the gravity of stockpiling both deadly weapons and hard drugs. But even after Hussein was led away to begin his sentence, the case did not end at the courtroom doors. Law enforcement was determined to ensure that Hussein didn't get to enjoy any of his ill-gotten gains. In a subsequent Proceeds of Crime Act hearing, the court sought to claw back the money he had made through his illegal empire. In December 2017, a judge ordered Hussein to repay £295,000 within 3 months, essentially the calculated profits of his drug business, or face an additional 3 years in prison on top of his 12-year sentence. Investigators also noted that a further £33,000 of suspected criminal benefit remained outstanding, to be recovered once additional hidden assets were identified. The message was unmistakable. Not only would Hussein lose his freedom for a long time, he'd also lose the fortune he had built through crime. Cases like Hussein served as a warning to others in the drug underworld. Law enforcement would come after their liberty and their loot. Despite high-profile busts like Hussein's, traffickers continued to test their luck. Fast forward to November 2021, and Birmingham Airport became the stage for yet another audacious smuggling attempt. This one involving a staggering amount of heroin and an overly confident courier. On that occasion, a 35-year-old man named Mohammed Uzair Rashid from Oldham in Greater Manchester arrived on a flight from Sialkot, Pakistan, via Dubai. As he moved through the airport with his luggage, nothing about him stood out. In fact, Rashid appeared remarkably calm, like a man with nothing to hide. However, Border Force officers decided to pull him aside for a closer inspection, a decision that proved incredibly fruitful. Inside Rashid's checked baggage, they discovered nearly 18 kilograms of heroin packed into numerous tightly wrapped bundles. It was an enormous quantity to find on one person, and the officers were only more alarmed when they tested the haul. Lab analysis revealed the heroin was exceptionally pure, roughly 66% to 71% purity. This kind of high-grade heroin often originates from South Asian opium fields and is rarely intercepted in such volume. Stopping this single shipment meant preventing a huge quantity of a deadly drug from reaching vulnerable users. In street terms, such purity is uncommon by the time heroin is sold on the corners. Rashid's stash was almost straight from the source. Those 18 kilograms, at that quality, could be cut with adulterants and multiplied into a far larger volume of product for street sale, yielding well over £900,000 in street value. Rashid had effectively tried to saunter through customs with almost £1 million worth of heroin in his bags. It's likely he had been promised a hefty payday for this job. Traffickers often lure couriers with the prospect of a life-changing reward for a single successful trip. But as is often the case, that tempting gamble did not pay off. CCTV footage later showed Rashid moving through the terminal with a steady, unflustered gait, pushing his baggage cart as if he hadn't a care in the world. Perhaps he believed that an elaborate cover story and his own composure would carry him through undetected. But once officers uncovered the drugs, his calm facade crumbled. Confronted with the bricks of heroin, Rashid scrambled to explain. First, he claimed the suitcases weren't his, a story that fell apart almost instantly given that airline baggage tags and records tied the luggage to him. When that excuse failed, he insisted he didn't know how the drugs got there, suggesting that someone else must have planted the packages without his knowledge. Those desperate lies didn't hold up for long, especially after investigators examined Rashid's mobile phone. What they found was a trove of WhatsApp messages that blew his denials out of the water. Rashid had been in continuous communication with someone in Pakistan, referred to as brother, essentially a handler who was overseeing the operation from afar. The messages made it clear that Rashid was not acting alone. He was being guided step by step through the smuggling process. In one exchange, where Rashid expressed anxiety about passing through customs, the handler reassured him to stay calm and tension-free, promising that God would be generous and everything would be fine. It was an ironic twist. The same phone and apps that helped his bosses give instructions also handed investigators the evidence to unravel the whole scheme. In other words, Rashid was receiving live coaching to keep his cool as he carried out this risky task. This revelation was chilling proof of how organized the operation was. It was as if Rashid were a pawn on a chessboard, and someone far away was directing his moves in real time. He was essentially a puppet, and his handler was pulling the strings from thousands of miles away. The phone evidence made it clear that Rashid was knowingly participating in a sophisticated supply chain, one that recruited couriers, financed flights, and coordinated movements across international borders. Had Rashid succeeded, they were likely contacts in the UK ready to receive and distribute the heroin. By May 2022, when Rashid appeared at Birmingham Crown Court, the evidence against him was overwhelming. He ultimately pleaded guilty to importing Class A drugs, seeing little point in contesting the mountain of proof. The judge sentenced Mohammed Uzair Rashid to 9 years in prison for his role in the operation. For 35-year-old Rashid, that means spending the rest of his 30s behind bars. One can imagine the shockwaves his arrest sent back to the organizers in Pakistan, a major shipment lost and a courier gone, forcing them to rethink their operations. Rashid's nearly tension-free journey through the airport had ended in handcuffs and a long stint behind bars. The NCA held up Rashid's case as yet another cautionary tale. No matter how confident or well-managed a smuggler may seem, and no matter what promises or reassurances they get from accomplices, the law can and will catch up to them, and the price for chasing quick drug money is a ruined life and years of lost freedom. Now we return to the family that started it all, the Kauser clan from Bradford, to see what happened when they finally faced justice for their £14 million cocaine scheme. In late 2024, Farzana Kauser, her children, and their associates stood before a judge in Birmingham Crown Court, and the consequences of their crimes came crashing down. At the center was Farzana Kauser herself, the mother turned mastermind. The court, weighing her leadership role and the vast scale of the operation, sentenced Farzana to 13 years and 4 months in prison. Given her age, that means she'll be well into her 60s by the time she's released. It was a stern punishment that fit the severity of orchestrating a massive narcotics conspiracy, made even more shocking by the fact that she enlisted her own children in the crime. Her eldest son, 33-year-old Junaid Shafak, who had been her chief lieutenant, received 10 years and 9 months behind bars. 28-year-old Mohammed Amir Shafak, one of the primary couriers rolling those suitcases full of cocaine, was handed 8 years and 9 months. 22-year-old Umar Mohammed, also heavily involved as a courier, got 8 years and 1 month. Then there was Safanor, just 19 at the time of the offences, who was given 7 years and 2 months in prison for her role. The family's 27-year-old daughter-in-law, Sarah Hussein, who had a comparatively minor part in one of the smuggling trips, received a 2-year sentence suspended for 2 years, meaning she avoided immediate prison time but would have to serve those 2 years if she reoffended or violated her probation. This suggested that her involvement was relatively minor or that there were mitigating factors in her favor. She was essentially given a second chance, providing she stayed out of trouble. Finally, their friend Khalid Abdul Qawi, 36, the non-family accomplice, was sentenced to 10 years and 9 months in prison. As the judge read out each sentence in turn, the reality set in. This family, which once sat around the same dinner table, would now be separated by prison walls for many years. One can only imagine the scene, a mother watching as her grown children are led away to serve long jail terms, all because of a scheme she orchestrated. It was a tragic end to the family's criminal chapter, and a stark illustration of how crime can consume everything. And what about the youngest member of the plot, Hamza? Because he was only 17 when the smuggling took place, his case had to be handled separately in the youth justice system. By the time the others were sentenced, Hamza had turned 18, but his sentencing was set for October 2025 after the conclusion of his family's trial. As of the latest reports, the court had not yet delivered a final decision for his case. However, given the seriousness of his involvement, essentially acting as a teenage drug courier under his mother's direction, it's likely that he too would face a significant period of detention, albeit one structured for a young offender. Excluding Hamza's pending case, Farzana's family members and their associate received nearly 60 years of prison time combined. The case drew national attention. It's not every day that a mother and so many of her children are exposed as the core of a drug cartel. It's exceedingly rare to see an entire family in the dock for running a narcotics ring. And the outcome was as dramatic as it was grim. A family that once shared ordinary life moments, dinners, holidays, everyday routines, was now essentially dismantled by the justice system. Farzana's merciless pursuit of profit through the drug trade ultimately cost her and her family everything: their freedom, their reputation, and the normal life they once pretended to lead. The merciless family behind Britain's £14 million cocaine trade had finally been stopped, and their story stands as a stark example of how audacious and destructive family-run crime can be. These cases, the family operation, the careless local dealer, and the puppet-like international courier, Each show a different facet of the drug trade, but they share a common lesson. No matter the scheme, eventually the law strikes back. Each of these criminals thought they had found a way to beat the system, either by exploiting airport routines, underestimating security, or maintaining a calm facade under pressure. And each one discovered that the reach of law enforcement is long and unrelenting. Spanning from 2016 to 2024, these cases show that the fight is continuous, a constant cat-and-mouse game between smugglers looking for any loophole and authorities working tirelessly to close those gaps. Even as traffickers devise new schemes, vigilant law enforcement and intelligence work can uncover and thwart them. What do you think about these cases, and the sentences each individual received? Did the punishments fit the crimes committed by this family and the other smugglers? It's startling to see how far people will go, even involving their own children in pursuit of illegal wealth, and equally striking to see how determined authorities are to foil these plots. We're eager to hear your thoughts, so let us know in the comments below. If you found this case breakdown informative, please give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thank you for watching.